On NBC 10 at Issue.
And good morning. I'm Steve Highsmith. The race for U.S. Senate to succeed Arlen Specter offers one of the clearest ideological choices. So what would each candidate offer you? With me now is Republican Pat Toomey. Congressman, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
What is voting for a Republican now different? How is it different from voting, say, in 2000 or 2002 or 4?
Well, it depends on which Republican, right? So voting for this Republican, voters in Pennsylvania are going to get someone who's going to be focused like a laser on job growth in the private sector, restoring fiscal discipline in Washington, clearing away some of these really overreaching regulatory efforts that are preventing us from having an economic recovery, and just some balance in Washington. That's what's really different. Right now, there's no balance in Washington. One party has complete control. I would argue it's been captured by its most liberal wing, like Nancy Pelosi and her allies. Joe Sestak's been voting in lockstep with that very liberal wing, and I just think we need to go in a different direction.
But a lot of people said
provide some balance.
In 06, and you weren't running then, you had term limited yourself, but in 06 and again obviously in 08, that they had had enough of the Republican Party. Things were bad, both the economy, the war, a lot of things. And why not give this president and the Democrats more than 22 months to fix a problem? I mean, hundreds of thousands of jobs were lost. The economy was falling at a 6% rate. Why not give them more time?
Because what they're doing is making it worse, Steve. I mean, just look at what we've seen. Serial bailouts of failing companies, nationalizing whole industries, spending money on a staggering scale, unprecedented deficits and debt, cap and trade, card check, government-run health care. The combined weight of all of these huge new government programs and this huge new cost is preventing business growth. It's preventing startups.
Two of those. On TARP, for example, the nationalized businesses. Basically, taxpayers are going to get their money back, might even make a profit. That's what the government is saying?
That's just one category, Steve. The fact is, Fannie and Freddie, which were at the very heart of this financial crisis, which I was warning about when I was in Congress 10 years ago, warning about the dangers of Fannie and Freddie. I tried to impose some new regulatory frameworks, much tougher regulations, so that Fannie and Freddie wouldn't spin out of control. Joe Sestak resisted those same types of measures, even in 2007. And now we're $148 billion of taxpayer money into Fannie and Freddie with no prospects of getting any of it back, and in all likelihood, these guys will pump more in.
The stimulus, a good portion of that went to tax cuts. A lot of it has gone for infrastructure. And while there are some mistakes that almost everybody points to in there, the CBO says the unemployment rate would be 0.7%, almost 2 points higher. So it worked a little?
No, I don't think so. First of all, there weren't many tax cuts at all. There were what they call tax cuts, but in fact those were checks that were sent to people that didn't pay taxes. So that's not a tax cut. There was a massive amount of transfer payments from the government to state governments, which actually just allowed state governments to kick the can down the road rather than deal with the fiscal imbalances that they'd created. There was very little infrastructure spending, and at the end of the day, going out and borrowing a bunch of money and spending it doesn't create wealth or prosperity or recovery. If that were the case, Greece would have the most successful economy in the world.
Well, Greece's structure is much different from ours. I mean, when people can retire, all kinds of things are different from it.
But fundamentally, you know, their premise is that when government spends money, it gets more than $1's worth out of every dollar spent, and frankly, that's ridiculous.
So you don't believe that these folks stopped the Great Depression?
Absolutely not. No. You know what I do? I will say there were things that were done that were right and that made sense, and that I've said that all along. The Fed needed to have a huge quantitative easing, a huge injection of money into the money supply. They did that. That was very important, probably by far the most important thing. The Fed opened the discount window to fundamentally solvent but illiquid institution. The increase of the FDIC guarantee might well have prevented a run on banks. So I think those steps made sense. But the TARP, I can't go there.
Let's deal with ideological extremism. You say Joe Sestak is on the left of his side. He's running an ad in which you basically have said years ago that you vote pretty much like Rick Santorum votes. A lot of people in Pennsylvania think Rick Santorum is extreme to the right. Is that correct?
Well, I think there's a big difference in our emphasis and focus. You know, my focus has always been on economic policy, getting spending under control. When I was in Congress, you know, I was writing an alternative budget because I thought the Republican budget spent too much money. I was trying to fight earmarks back, 10 years ago. I actually led a filibuster of sorts on the House floor to prevent a Republican spending bill because it was too bloated. So people have said, well, boy, he's awfully conservative because he thinks we need to cut spending. Well, I think that's where most Pennsylvanians are.
At the end of the day, you still voted for those budgets, correct?
I voted for a better budget. Now, in the end, when my budget failed, I was then left with two choices, a budget that wasn't perfect and a budget that spent much more than that. I voted for the best budget that was available.
When you were in Congress from 99 to 2005, the League of Conservation Voters and NARAL Pro-Choice America each rated you a 0. The Alliance for Retired Americans a 6% rating. The Christian Coalition of America gave you 100, the NRA an A, and the American Conservative Union 97%. Is that indicative of how you would vote going forward?
I don't know. The different groups have different criteria. I don't put a lot of stock in that. I don't check to see whether a vote is scored by one organization or another before I cast it.
You want money to follow the kids when it comes to education.
That's right.
That means it could go to a parochial school, a private school.
Right.
Why should taxpayers give money to the Archdiocese of Philadelphia or a Protestant Christian school or a Muslim school?
They shouldn't give the money to the school. They should give the money to the parent, and then let the parent decide what school the child should attend. See, I think it's very important for our society to ensure that every child get the best possible education. That's not happening today, Steve. And while it's vitally important that we provide the resources for that to happen, it's not clear to me that the government has to actually deliver the service.
All right, we'll continue in a moment. I have to take a break. More with former Congressman Pat Toomey and later Congressman Joe Sestak on NBC 10 Edition.